Welcome to Gripping Tales. Are you ready for today's video? It starts now.
Just imagine this. It's March 15th, 2029, and Elon Musk stands at the Kennedy Space Center watching the 47th Starship launch toward Mars, not as a billionaire's fantasy, not as a sci-fi dream, but as the routine Tuesday shuttle carrying 200 more colonists to humanity's second home. How did we get here? How did a South African entrepreneur's wild ambition to make humans a multi-planetary species actually come true? Let me take you back to 2025, when everything changed. It started with the breakthrough. After years of explosive landings, crashed prototypes, and Twitter memes about rapid, unscheduled disassembly, SpaceX finally cracked the code. Not just reliable Mars transport, but the holy grail of space colonization. Closed-loop life support systems that could actually work. The key wasn't better rockets, though the Starship Mark 7 was pretty impressive. The key was biology. Dr. Sarah Chen, a brilliant bioengineering researcher poached from MIT, figured out how to genetically modify algae to not just produce oxygen from Martian CO2, but to literally eat the toxic perchlorates in Martian soil and excrete fertile Earth. She called them terraforming algae, but the colonists would come to know them by a simpler name: Marsweed, because these little green organisms spread like wildfire across the Martian surface, creating patches of breathable atmosphere and farmable soil faster than anyone thought possible. The first permanent colony, New Boca Chica, was established in 2027 with 1,000 brave souls. By 2029, the population had exploded to 50,000. By 2032, we're talking about 500,000 people living permanently on Mars. But this isn't a story about rockets and engineering. This is a story about what happens when you take humanity, with all our ambitions, fears, politics, and dreams, and drop us on an alien world 140 million miles from everything we've ever known. Living on Mars in 2030 wasn't like the movies. No sleek white corridors or gravity-defying citadels. It was more like the Wild West, if the Wild West had been freezing cold, had unbreathable air, and where a single equipment failure could kill everyone in the settlement. The first thing you noticed about New Boca Chica was the smell. Despite all the air filtration systems, there was always this metallic, dusty scent that reminded you that you were breathing recycled air on a planet that wanted you dead. The colonists lived in interconnected domed structures that looked like a cross between a shopping mall and a submarine. Everything was built underground or covered by thick radiation shielding, because Mars has no magnetosphere to protect against cosmic rays. But here's what the earthbound media never understood. The colonists weren't just surviving, they were thriving. Within 3 years, they had functioning farms producing potatoes, soybeans, and even coffee. They had workshops building everything from furniture to electronics, from Martian raw materials. They had schools, hospitals, bars, and even a comedy club called the Red Planet Laugh Track. The social dynamics were fascinating. Without the traditional class structures of Earth, Mars society developed along different lines. Your status wasn't determined by what school you went to or who your parents were, but by how much you contributed to the survival and prosperity of the colony. The best atmospheric technician was treated like royalty. The person who figured out how to brew decent beer from Martian-grown barley became a folk hero. The woman who established the first successful pregnancy and childbirth protocols on Mars, Dr. Lisa Rodriguez, was basically considered a saint. And then, there were the kids. The first generation of true Martians. Children born on Mars were different, not just culturally, but physically. Lower gravity meant they grew up taller, with longer limbs and larger lung capacity. They could hold their breath longer, jump higher, and their bones were actually denser despite the reduced gravity. Apparently, the genetic modifications the colonists had undergone to better process Martian minerals had unexpected benefits. But more than that, they thought differently. These kids had never seen a natural blue sky, never felt rain, never experienced seasons in the way Earth children did. Their playground was alien caves and canyon systems. Their bedtime stories were about the brave engineers who kept the air recyclers running. They were the first generation of humans who considered another planet home. By 2035, Mars had a population of 1.2 million people spread across 12 major settlements. And with that growth came problems that nobody had anticipated. The first major crisis was political. Earth-based governments and corporations expected Mars to remain a colonial territory, following Earth laws and paying Earth taxes. But when you're living on a planet where a single bureaucratic delay could mean the difference between life and death, Earth's legal system started to feel pretty irrelevant. The breaking point came when Earth-based environmental regulators tried to shut down the Olympus mining operation for violating clean air standards. On Mars, where there was no breathable air without artificial life support, they want us to follow Earth's environmental regulations. Marcus Webb, the colony's first elected governor, said during a colony-wide broadcast, "On a planet where the environment is literally trying to kill us every second of every day." The laughter from the colonists was bitter, but it marked the beginning of something unprecedented in human history: a genuine independence movement on another planet. The second crisis was economic. Mars was producing incredible technological innovations, advances in life support, radiation shielding, closed-loop agriculture, and materials science that were revolutionizing life on Earth. But all the profits were flowing back to Earth-based investors. Meanwhile, the colonists were working 60-hour weeks in life-threatening conditions to build the infrastructure that was making other people rich. "We're mining minerals, developing technology, and risking our lives," said Dr. Chen, who had evolved from chief scientist to something like the colony's spiritual leader. And for what? So some shareholders on Earth can buy bigger yachts? The third crisis was social. As more people arrived from Earth, cultural conflicts emerged between the Earthers, recent arrivals who still thought in terms of Earth politics and social structures, and the Reds, long-term colonists, who had adapted to Martian ways of thinking. Earthers couldn't understand why colony decisions were made by council consensus rather than corporate hierarchy. Reds couldn't understand why Earthers cared about stock prices when there were atmospheric processors that needed maintenance. The Mars Independence Declaration was signed on July 4, 2036, chosen specifically to echo Earth's own revolutionary history. But this wasn't just symbolic politics. This was a genuine breakup between worlds. Mars declared itself a sovereign planet, free from Earth's political and economic control. They established their own government, their own currency, the Sol, and their own legal system based on colony survival needs rather than Earth traditions. Earth's response was swift and predictably capitalist. Economic sanctions. No more supply ships. No more technology transfers. No more support for colonists who wanted to return to Earth. Mars was cut off, forced to prove it could survive entirely on its own. And for a while, it looked like Earth had won. The colony population actually shrank, as some colonists, terrified of being stranded, took the last Earthbound ships home. Critical supplies ran low. Some of the smaller settlements had to be abandoned. But something remarkable happened during this crisis. Instead of collapsing, Mars society became stronger. Without Earth's support, the colonists had to innovate faster than ever. They developed new food production techniques, new manufacturing processes, new ways of recycling and reusing every resource. They created educational systems that produced engineers, doctors, and scientists trained specifically for Martian conditions. Most importantly, they developed a collective identity. They weren't Earth refugees anymore. They were Martians. "We came here as humans with a dream," Governor Webb said during the second anniversary of independence. "We've become something new. We've become a civilization that's adapted to challenges our ancestors never imagined." In 2038, three massive Earth-based corporations, Planetary Resources Inc., Mars Industrial Development, and surprisingly, Amazon — Jeff Bezos apparently wasn't going to let Elon have all the space glory — launched what they called humanitarian relief missions to Mars. The colonists called it an invasion. These weren't supply ships. These were corporate takeover attempts. Each corporation had developed their own transport systems and planned to establish competing colonies that would remain loyal to Earth and undermine Martian independence. The legal justification was brilliant in its cynicism. Since Mars had declared independence, Earth-based companies argued they were free to establish their own sovereign settlements that didn't recognize Martian authority. What followed was humanity's first interplanetary corporate war. Mars couldn't stop the Earth ships from landing. They had no military and no way to shoot down incoming spacecraft, but they could make life extremely difficult for the corporate colonists. The Martian government refused to share atmospheric processing technology, water sources, or medical facilities with the corporate settlements. When corporate colonists had medical emergencies, they had to choose between accepting help from rebel Mars medics or dying. When corporate mining operations contaminated water sources that both communities depended on, the established colonists had to choose between environmental protection and letting their enemies suffer. The corporate colonists, meanwhile, were discovering that Mars wasn't like Earth. You couldn't just throw money at problems and expect them to disappear. When your life support systems failed, you needed engineers who understood Martian conditions, not Earth-based customer service representatives. Within 18 months, 2 of the 3 corporate colonies had been abandoned. Amazon's new Seattle settlement lasted longest, mainly because Bezos had actually hired away some of Mars's best engineers, with promises of enormous salaries paid in Earth currency. But money meant nothing when your atmospheric processors were failing, and the only people who knew how to fix them were the rebel Martians you were supposed to be competing with. The corporate wars ended not with dramatic battles, but with quiet surrenders. Corporate colonists began defecting to Mars settlements. Earth corporations found themselves spending billions to support tiny, failing outposts that produced nothing of value. By 2040, Mars was truly independent. Not because they'd won a war, but because they'd proven that their way of life was simply more adapted to the realities of living on another planet. The 2040s became known as Mars's Golden Age. With independence secured and the population stabilized at around 2.5 million, the colony could focus on expansion and innovation rather than just survival. This was when Mars started to become genuinely alien, not just in location, but in culture. The colony developed art forms that were impossible on Earth. Sculptors worked with low gravity to create flowing, impossible structures. Musicians composed for the acoustic properties of domed spaces and thin atmospheres. Writers crafted stories about the unique psychology of people who could see Earth in their night sky but would never return home. They developed new sports, new festivals, new social customs. The Red Wedding Ceremony, where couples committed to spending their lives building Mars civilization, became more popular than traditional Earth marriages. But most remarkably, they developed new technology that was starting to surpass Earth's capabilities. Mars biotechnology was advancing at incredible speeds. When your survival depends on maximizing every biological system, you get very good at genetic engineering, very fast. Mars engineers developed plants that could grow in nearly pure CO2, animals that could survive in low-pressure environments, and even human genetic modifications that improved radiation resistance and calcium absorption. The closed-loop life support systems that had started as survival necessities evolved into the most efficient ecological systems humans had ever created. Mars settlements were achieving 99.7% resource recycling rates, better than Earth's most advanced cities. And then there were the children. The second generation of Martian-born humans were not just culturally different from Earth humans. They were becoming biologically distinct. Dr. Rodriguez, who had overseen hundreds of Martian births, published research that stunned both planets. Martian children showed enhanced cognitive abilities in spatial reasoning, improved lung efficiency, stronger bone density despite low gravity, and most remarkably, genetic adaptations that seemed to be developing in real time. "We're not just watching human adaptation," she wrote. "We're watching human evolution in fast forward." But this golden age was about to end with a discovery that would change everything humanity thought it knew about Mars, about life, and about their place in the universe. On September 3, 2043, a routine deep mining operation, 500 meters beneath the Olympia settlement, broke through into a chamber that shouldn't have existed. The chamber was artificial, clearly constructed, and it was old. Geological analysis suggested it had been there for at least 50,000 years. Dr. Chen, now in her 70s but still sharp as a laser, was among the first scientists to explore the chamber. What she found defied everything humans thought they knew about Mars. The chamber contained technology, not recognizable technology, but clearly manufactured objects with purposes that seemed almost familiar. Atmospheric processors that worked on principles human engineers didn't understand. Energy sources that had been running continuously for millennia. Most disturbing of all, genetic material that seemed designed to modify and enhance biological systems. "It's like someone left us an instruction manual," Dr. Chen reported to the Mars Council. But the instructions are for technologies we're only just beginning to understand. Further exploration revealed that the chamber was part of a vast underground network that extended beneath most of Mars's major settlements. The terraforming algae that had made Mars colonization possible? They hadn't just been modified by Dr. Chen's team, they'd been modified by whoever built these chambers tens of thousands of years ago. The genetic modifications that were helping Mars colonists adapt to their new planet? Some of them matched genetic sequences found in the ancient databases buried beneath Mars. The horrible, wonderful truth was becoming clear. Mars hadn't been terraformed by human colonists. It had been prepared for them. By someone else. Long ago, as Dr. Chen stood in that ancient chamber, surrounded by technology that had been waiting 50,000 years for humans to arrive, she realized that Elon Musk's dream of making humans a multi-planetary species hadn't been ambitious enough. Mars wasn't humanity's second home. It was their original home. The chamber contained genetic records suggesting that Earth hadn't been humanity's birthplace. It had been their sanctuary. Humans were Martians who had fled to Earth millennia ago when their planet's atmosphere collapsed, and now they had finally come home. The colonists weren't pioneers, they were refugees, returning to a world their ancestors had prepared for their eventual homecoming. As news of the discovery spread throughout the Mars colonies and back to Earth, one question haunted everyone who heard it. If humans had originally come from Mars, what had forced them to leave? And was it still out there, waiting for humanity's return? Dr. Chen looked at the star charts displayed in the ancient chamber, showing stellar positions from 50,000 years ago, and realized that some questions were more terrifying than comforting. Humanity had made it to Mars. But according to these ancient records, they were the second species to try to make the red planet home. The first species had left behind more than just technology and genetic modifications. They had left behind warnings. Sweet dreams, everyone, and remember, sometimes the greatest adventure is discovering that you were never lost. You were just taking the long way home.
Thanks for watching. Every ending hides the beginning of another tale, and ours is already on its way. Stay tuned, you'll find the next chapter right here, and soon.